I went to San Francisco, and for the first time in almost 10 years, I felt the ocean sand between my toes instead of the desert floor. I smelled sea breeze instead of burning asphalt on yet another blazing day, scorching our car stereos and retting our faces with the temptress in the wind. I wiggled my toes amidst new company, and being a shy girl at first, I only talked to the people I knew, not to the friends of friends of friends of friends. I listened in to a million conversations of a million sweet nothings, and I'd creep up upon conversation or two of a pompous California man. His tan was the hue of the sand, and his hair was bleached blonde by either the sand or the ocean. I couldn't really tell, but what I could tell was that this man always had something to say, a wise word or two to stroke his strung up male ego so that he could come upon all of us meager folk with nothing of much importance to say. Or so he thought. The more I heard him strum a guitar and raise his voice enough for everyone to hear on that minute beach, I realized that this man had nothing new to say, nothing profound to tell. He didn't have me in a tailspin or any sort of spinning motion at all. His conversation was stagnant like that sand on the beach, and his words were beginning to fry. And as many friends do, I began speaking of the one true passion I have, because I'm pompous and predictable too, and began to shout whispers of my fear to speak, to shout to peers of mine at the oh-so-legendary 16th and Mission Poetry Corner. Lo and behold, this California man pipes up like an out-of-tune organ in church and says one thing. Don't worry, they're just words. Is that true? That words are only words and nothing more? Please just explain of how restricting these words can be, and how much the meaning of a simple penmanship error can change the way things are settled in court, or the medications we take to smother our own flawed perception of ourselves in the mirror as I'm looking into myself, speaking the apparently obsolete words in which I speak to try and make a difference. How about you tell that to Martin Luther King as he walked upon the blazing stage of a million angry glances that watched on their media-distorted television as he gave his famous line, "I have a dream." Well, Mr. King, so do I, and to you, California man, that is only to change the broken pieces of you, realign them to make you realize that no, I'm not perfect, but my love is pure as gold, and so is your heart and soul if you could only see past the fact that they are just words. That when Hitler had nothing better in his jail cell to do than to write about a regime so massive that it took the whole world by storm, tell me that words are just words when you look into the eye of any soul-struck, broken, lost survivors of an era based upon they are just words. Sound right to you? That the lungs of every starving child Africa mass produces means nothing, because they quite obviously have nothing to say. Why, do you ask? Because their deaths are ruining their water supply, and have lost the lead of importance because, well, quite obviously, their words are just words according to you. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers have died in a war that has only been caused by a man with such an extraordinarily loud voice, the side of the state from which he is raised, to learn that gays were just faggots, like maggots, nothing more than one other type of human sent to hell for a sin, all only in the name of love. Love what I'm saying in a way that these words are just words, that I am gay, just another maggot in Texas, an angel in Oregon. I am who I am, and if it wasn't for many generations of angry men and women sticking up to what they believe in, my love would be lost in fear of losing something more important, my life. That this freedom of expression to you now shouldn't be appreciated because that would mean appreciating a piece of paper written 200 years ago, explaining the freedoms of all, and restricting us from becoming just one more animal with no voice to speak, and just to lead a life in silence even we have had much to say. I speak vicariously through a voice of a slave from a plantation farm that gave his voice for his wife, who died because she spoke too soon in a crowd of white men, waiting to pay a slip of bills for a contract of which words were bonding her life on their land in her hands as which she would never set foot on a free ground or leave the confines of her shackles, and all she said was, "Why can't you understand that this world has only become what it is based on the needs and wants of mankind and the words in which they argue with? If these words were just words, then maybe no wars would have been fought, the religious lines that blind us from one another when really we all love the same God, and that the scripture in this literature is blessing to the reader and a curse to the world as it teaches us to judge freely without cause. Fuck you and your love, your peace, and your God. They're just words. They're just words. When a father looks into his son's eyes on his deathbed after 50 years telling his son for the first time, "I love you. I am proud to say that you are my son." They're just words. As a child bullies a classmate into suicide that night and the only thing that was on the last godforsaken letter, "I'm sorry, but I just couldn't take it anymore. I love you, Mom, but I just couldn't settle the score." If it hasn't gotten through to you yet, I'll give you one last example. You told me that day on the beach that words were just words, and after all of this time, what you said has stuck with me. Words are just words when nothing is said, and I believe this world is better off with them than without them, because without them my words wouldn't stick. So when I tell you to shove your egotistical words up your ass, you might just understand.